After 11 years, Clarence finally has his own Marvel movie, and so I thought that this would be a great time to talk about the supporting character to leading role pipeline and the challenges therein. In the early days of this channel, I used to rag on AMC's The Walking Dead for how that show handled its supporting characters. For the unbidden, The Walking Dead does this thing where a character will be introduced in a third-string supporting role and not given much to do or say, but they'll stick around season after season, and as bigger characters leave the show, those supporting characters will slowly creep into their slots and take their place in the main title sequence. There are two reasons I don't like this model. The obvious one is that the supporting characters were not initially conceived of as having meaningful perspectives. So when the show decides to give them more screen time, they have to backtrack and be like, what do you mean? Carol's adoptive son's best friend's little sister's pen pal's dog's veterinarian has always had a nuanced perspective on hope. Except that character has just been an NPC for 28 seasons, during which time none of that depth was apparent in their actions or their dialogue. You didn't set it up because you didn't know it, and now you're handicapped by a past you didn't create with any degree of foresight. But the other reason is more subtle. It's so subtle that it infiltrates big budget prestige TV as well. Managing supporting characters across multiple installments can be like when you buy a very specific ingredient for a recipe, but after you make the thing, now the ingredient is just in your fridge, and it doesn't go with anything else. It's just sitting there, and you're like, I guess I could put it in the risotto, but you wouldn't if you didn't have to. It's like this sense of obligation to do something with the character simply because they've been here for so long, which is why in Game of Thrones, a random mercenary gets to climb to one of the highest offices in the land just because he's one of the characters, and that means we have to find a role for him. And that agenda compromises the believability of the story because it clearly broadcasts that there are writers behind the scenes trying to make everything work, trying to tie off every loose end. Which is like what writers do, yeah, sure, but even if you do find a way to justify this random mercenary being in the room where big things happen, the fact that you went through all the trouble to do that reveals that you wanted to, because the actor's agent negotiated a higher fee and now they're on the press tour. And the story is now being written as if it knows who the main characters are. And the traditional term for this is plot armor, but it's also a soft fourth wall break. So I was suspicious of Clarence getting his own movie. He was initially conceived of as a supporting character for the original Captain America back in 2014, a fellow veteran who could help Steve get accustomed to civilian life. And this role was 100% positive. Clarence was designed as a healthy example for another character. In other words, Clarence started at the very top of the moral totem pole. He had no flaws because his role in the story was never to be flawed or to have an arc in his own right. It was just to lift another character up. And the character he was meant to lift up was already a healthy dude. So Clarence had to be double healthy. And by doing this, they kind of wrote him into a corner because there's no obvious way for him to grow. There's no gaping deficiency or lesson to be learned. He's just a good dude. And you revealed his backstory already, so you can't give him anything in that department either. So we first meet wonderful, idyllic Clarence in Captain America 2, and he serves his purpose in that movie. He's great. And then he has a cameo in Avengers Age of Ultron, and then he has a cameo in Ant-Man, and neither of these cameos involve him doing anything character specific. He's just there in costume. And then he shows up in Captain America Civil War, and he is completely loyal to Steve's team. And that tracks. Steve's his friend. And then he's in Infinity War. He fights the aliens, and he turns to dust. In Endgame, he comes back on your left, fights some more, and when it's all said and done, Steve Rogers gives him the Captain America shield and says, you get to be on the poster now. And then they were like, okay, let's give this guy a show. I had not watched Clarence Rogers' Falcon America and the Metal Arm Guy, the series. When I dislike an entertainment service, I simply stop giving them money, and I really was not a fan of the early Disney Plus projects. However, one of my gay roommates has a Disney Plus subscription, which means I was finally able to fill myself in on what Clarence has been up to. I was shocked to learn that after being given the Captain America mantle, Clarence actually turns it down. He throws away what Steve gave him in the very first episode. I didn't think you would do that. And what follows is an attempt to humanize this character. Rick and Morty. I promise this is going somewhere. Rick and Morty has some really well-written episodes in its early seasons. My favorite episode of the show ever is Season 2, Episode 4, Total Recall. In it, the Smith family encounters a race of alien parasites who embed themselves in your memories and make you think you've known them for years. You have no way of knowing if your best friend of 20 years is actually your best friend or an alien that showed up yesterday and fabricated all of those memories so that it could live in your house. But the parasites have one weakness: they can't create bad memories. And once the characters realize this, they're able to easily discern who is real and who's not. The parasites are put on the spot and asked if they can recall a bad memory with one of the main characters. The answers they come up with are at best neutral. They cannot conceive of actual negativity. And the Falcon and the Winter Soldier has a similar approach to giving Clarence flaws. After passing the shield off, he goes home to the bayou where he reunites with his sister, and she's a bit upset with him. These scenes with his sister are meant to make him seem flawed and multidimensional, but if you actually listen to what she's saying, it's basically, you went off to fight aliens and save the world, and then you were randomly selected to disappear for 5 years, and I had to take care of our family. How could you? And those emotions are completely valid. I believe that she would feel that way, even if it's not fair. But the scene is framed as if she's making a point. Several times the show presents these conversations which are meant to imply Clarence did something wrong, but he has literally always done his best.
But can you accept that I did what I thought was right?
And a lot of people will tell you that the appeal of Clarence is just that. He's relatable. He's just a regular guy doing what he can. And relatability is fine, but I want to push back against the idea that relatability is a product in and of itself. Relatability is bait. Relatability makes the audience go, ooh, that's me. That's like me. I'm like that. And so they latch onto the character. But then once you have them, you still have to do something with that. Relatability alone is not enough. Imagine if an infomercial was like, hey, you. Yes, you. Do you have leaks in your roof? And then it just ended. It's like, oh, yeah, that does describe me. I identify with that. But it does nothing transformative with that connection. It doesn't introduce any new ideas. But yeah, in actual drama terms, I feel like the point of making a character relatable is to prime the audience for the big emotional thing that's about to happen. But Clarence does not get a big emotional thing. Sure, he is present for intense situations, but in every one of those intense situations, his reactions are principled and sensible. He makes the default hero choices, and he says the default hero lines. They don't challenge him on any fundamental level. The climactic moment of Brave New World is Clarence saying inspirational things to mocap Harrison Ford, but anybody could have given that speech. Nothing about Clarence's background makes him the best character to teach these specific lessons to this specific guy. If he were consoling a kid who fell off a bike, it would have the same amount of personal relevance as this. You can dress him up as a protagonist, you can put him in dramatic high-stakes situations, but Clarence is not a three-dimensional character. Not yet. In the next Avengers movie, Clarence needs an ugly moment. I don't mean a moment where he tries his best, but it just isn't enough. I don't mean a moment where he makes the most appropriate choice given the information he has. I don't mean a moment where the stress of being a hero really gets to him. I don't mean a moment where something bad happens to him. I mean a moment where he personally fucks up. Not just tactically, I'm talking an emotional, psychological fuck up with real consequences. But how do we do this? He's had perfect integrity for his entire run. The Russos can't suddenly be like, oh, well, he was flawed all along. They have to use what's already there, and what's already there is a guy who is a goody good boy to the bone. I'm sorry, he is. But as always, I think the only way out is through. The alleged topic of this video is the new MCU film Captain America Brave New World, and as I've gone over, I don't think this story has emotional teeth. But that's okay. A story doesn't need that as long as it ticks enough other boxes. Brave New World is competently plotted in its own right, and it does tie up a lot of plot loose ends, which is respectable. It's like one of those satisfying thing fitting into other thing videos. You're like, oh, that, it kind of just synthesizes. And I think that is, admirable. I don't think that's a bad thing. If Brave New World laid some style and some personality on top of its plot, the absence of meaty character work could be overlooked. I wouldn't have even thought to make this video because I'd be enjoying it. But not a single line in this thing feels like it was written with the actors in mind. The actress Shira Haas, who plays the president's agent lady, is given this line, "What the hell are you guys doing here?" And it clearly doesn't work with her accent. It does not roll off the tongue. It was written for an American. All of the dialogue is cookie cutter. There is no sense of character voice. This is an actual exchange. "I am a wartime president." "Yes, Mr. President." There is no law from the realm of creation that tells us that is dumb, but it just is. You can't say president in 2 back-to-back lines. I can't explain why that sucks. It just does. Be cleverer. And then Liv Tyler, Betty Ross, comes back at the end to say hi to her dad. And her lines are, "Hi, Dad," and "It's all right. We could just sit and talk for a little while." Flag on the play. Mandatory style pass. I don't believe that Ross won the election because the script does not leverage Harrison's personality. I know he's like a gruff, angry guy, but you cast him, so you could either work against the grain or you could use that. You could weave that into his appeal as a character. But now anybody could have played that role. Let Tim Blake Nelson be a little freak. Why is he just saying paint by numbers villain stuff? Did anybody have fun making this movie? Anyways, Brave New World opens with Clarence serving as the new Captain America. And had you never seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you would just assume he's been Captain America since the end of Endgame, when Captain America was like, hey, I want you to be Captain America.
Thank you. I'll do my best.
There are two ways to look at this. One, it is smart. With Disney Plus shows, Marvel has created levels of relevance. If you just watch the movies, you'll know what's happening. The supplemental material is optional. It's just for the people who like what they see and want to purchase more. This is a good business strategy. But at the same time, if you can just ignore a chunk of the story and everything will still make sense, then that chunk of the story was categorically not important. Clarence's core struggle in this film, if you want to call it that, is that he feels small and out of his depth. He doesn't have super strength, he gets winded, he takes damage, he has to work a lot harder for his victories, and you can tell it weighs on his self-esteem and confidence. But after the events of the story, Clarence is like, you know what? I do my best, I'm okay, and that's okay. Just fully accepting his situation. And that's how it ends. Roll credits. And you could view this as the character coming into his own, but I hope not. Just looking at Clarence's minimal development so far, I want to believe that we're still in the first act of the character's journey and that he still has a lot further to go. Which feels weird, right? Because he's been around for like 11 years at this point, and we're so used to him, and it almost feels like he has a kind of seniority. But that's not how it works, right? If you want a character to go hard, you got to go hard with the character. You can't just cut the line and say, oh, well, he's been here for a while. That makes him an iconic hero. He's not. He doesn't have anything. He's lame. If he ever wants to be a real boy, Clarence has to fail. And while no particular flaw has been highlighted, you could attach his overly humble beliefs about himself to his status as a B-list character and frame that as a flaw. As in, he sees himself as a sidekick, he sees himself as ordinary, just like the fans see him as ordinary. It would kind of be a retcon, but also kind of not. It would crystallize the overall lethargic energy surrounding his character into an actual story beat. Clarence's critical failure in the future needs to come from a place of being too comfortable out of the spotlight. He needs a moment where he fails because he never considered he was that guy. There needs to be a situation where something needs to be done and Clarence doesn't think about it. He's tied up with some other smaller task. He believes someone else will come and be the hero, like in The Prisoner of Azkaban when Harry doesn't attempt the Patronus charm because he thinks his deceased father will come and cast it for him. But in Clarence's case, there are severe consequences for that beta moment. Something horrible happens. And we're in his POV too, so we learn about the consequences when he learns about the consequences. And then after the dust clears, you give Clarence a scene. You put him in a dark room and you make him reflect. And the best suited supporting character walks in and talks to him. And you let Mackie get in his feels and you write a scene tailored to his personality. And the scene is just him breaking. Full stop. Tears, it all comes out. The writing needs to get ugly with him. Ugly is human. And then he picks himself back up off the floor and you give him a big triumphant moment where he really gets to be that guy. So who is this other character he's talking to? Who is the scene partner? I would have it be a character who has made a similar catastrophic misstep. A character who paid the ultimate price for his blind spots. A character like... No, you did not! Plot-wise, I don't know how the Russos would even get these two in a room together. And to be honest, I'm not like terribly invested in seeing more Chris Pratt in the Marvel movies. I'm like kind of like, yeah, he did his thing and it was fine. The character was kind of put to bed at the end of Guardians 3, if I remember correctly. But it makes sense. It makes sense both ways. Need I remind you, a mentor moment would be a new thing for Peter Quill as well. Peter got his act together in Guardians 1, he got over his daddy issues in Guardians 2, and then he made his third appearance in Infinity War where he was comedic relief until Thanos made him prove his love for Gamora by killing her, which turned out to be a sick joke, and then an even sicker joke when Thanos killed her himself. That's all Peter knows. And when he learns she's dead, he has a complete tantrum, which allows Thanos to get the upper hand, which results in, from Peter's perspective, all of his friends dying and then himself. He wakes up to someone saying, come on, bro, we gotta go, we gotta beat Thanos, there's still time. And so he does that. He comes back to Earth for the first time after losing his mother, which is unfortunately not acknowledged, and will never get that opportunity again. RIP. And then he goes back to space after the fighting is done, still hoping he can get Gamora back. Peter is still a bit of a man-child in Guardians 3. He's trying to argue a girl who literally didn't remember him into dropping everything and starting a relationship. That's very strange. But he realizes that he's in the wrong and he lets her go. And now he's a much more mature person. According to all the rules of story, he can be a mentor now. And the best person for him to be a mentor to is someone who just completely dropped the ball like he once did. Our new and improved Clarence. It's those moments where the weaker parts of characters bubble up from their unconscious minds and sabotage them. Those are the real failures. failures, the ones they actually grow from. Clarence did not get one of those failures in Brave New World. He didn't get a truly human failure, and he didn't get one on his TV show either. So you could view him as a lost cause dramatically, or you could view him as an absolute powder keg with massive storytelling potential. Anyone this bland is a psychic break waiting to happen. Marvel just has to be brave enough to go there. That's all. As you can see, there's some stuff behind me now. My interior decorator skill tree is still sprouting, so recommendations welcome. Okay, take it easy. Bye.